and that is a what's called a fresh milled whole grain bread. And by milling the grain ourselves, we eliminate all the chemical processing. We provide more vitamin E into the flour, and the flour obviously is fresher. And it tends to keep more phytonutrients. This is just a stone mill, a 20-inch stone mill, and it provides enough flour for us, more than enough. We mill maybe 2 hours a day to be able to provide the flour. But here's how it comes. It comes in, we get our wheat out of Montana, and it's certified chemical-free wheat. And it goes in the mill like as a kernel. And then we come out, of course, the flour. This is what you call a medium grind, not quite a fine grind, you know. But we also, these are rye berry. We're still working on getting our rye milling down, but you're able to do rye and various different grains. So being able to get a higher nutrient level by milling yourself and avoid the storage of it and the chemicalization of it. We buy this wheat is from Montana. It's grown at 4,900 feet. It's a certified chemical-free wheat, and it's some of the highest protein wheat grown in the U.S. It ranges from 15 to 17% in its protein content. That's pretty much the basis of the milling. And we move from there to the mixers, and we have two mixers of different types. We got a vertical mixer, which is this Hobart, and that mixes our soft yeast, our soft breads or our yeast breads. And this is a spiral mixer that mixes all the artisan breads. And the artisan breads, we use a small amount of the fresh milled flour, but that's a whole different production cycle than the breads we've been making for 15 years. We added them when we came here. This holds 350 pounds of dough, you know, at one time.
Where's the gigantic rolling pin?
That's me. They put something here. And then we'll move into here and we just make up everything that on the makeup table. And if you have any specific questions about artisan bread,
You've got 350 pounds. How do you roll that out?
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this you have to unload by hand. That's why the bowl goes up high. Okay, but you put it in a little hopper and you roll it. And actually, the way the process goes on that is we fresh mill it, we age it for a few days. It goes to, then it's mixed into the vertical mixer, and then it goes on the table with shape, and it's baked within about an hour 4 times. And it's a sponge dough method, which is considered a triple fermentation method. But it's all done in one day, okay? Artisan breads, we start with a starter, rye starter, wheat starter, a regular flour starter, develop an acidic level and culture, mix it, feed it, and then come back and mix it, then shape it, and then we put it into a walk-in cold storage fermentation, which is not being done in very many places. And Europe has decided that that's probably going to make the best bread. And it lowers the acidity level of the sourdough, but it increases the enzyme activity, which gives you a little more balanced flavor. You know? Yeah, it goes. John shapes it all. You know, he's the brains behind our artisan bread. I kid him because I want him to start a baking school and call it the Breadheads.
Yeah. I call it
He's a perfect breadhead.
How about the bird brain?
John, our breadheads by nature.
The second test bake was like 5 in the morning. I was like, hey man, come check it out.
But after John does the shaping, we do the mixing, and then we do the shaking. It gets stored into the water. Is there anything in here now, John?
Probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Just rolls
No bread in there now.
It just rolls into the walk-in, sits overnight, and then John wipes it, we'll see if we do it in the morning, and puts it in the oven.
Is each made?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it's no, I mean, it goes through 2 shapes. The dough gets mixed, and then it gets pulled out from the tub where it both ferments, and then it gets scaled, so it gets weighed, pound 8 ounces. Every loaf, except for baguettes, are pretty much 680 grams. So it gets scaled and then it gets pre-shaped. It gets scaled, and then it gets pre-shaped and let it rest for like 30 minutes. Then we come back and shape everything. It's already been scaled, so that way you can scale everything real quick, and then when it's time to shape, you don't have a scale on the table.
But it actually, John, when you say that, when you say that gives you a more balanced flavor, the cold fermentation, or?
I mean, it really, the longer the bread ferments, I mean, if you were to let it ferment at room temperature, it would be ready to go in a couple hours. But if it's cold, then it slows down the fermentation process. But in the meantime, I guess the amylase enzymes have more time to break down the starch that's in the flour. So I guess it makes it easier to digest, and it gives a better color to the bread because the starch is turning to sugar. And so you can see that in the bread. Plus, when it's cold and you put it in maybe at 50 degrees in the steam tube oven, then it gets a crust that's like trying to hold hydration. You can see the bubbles in the crust, but it creates a more, I guess it lowers the acidity of the bread, or lowers the pH, it raises the acidity. So it helps create a more sour flavor. I mean, you could take it as far as like probably 28 hours proofing, and that would be the most sour. After that, your bread will turn into a starter. It'll turn into basically something that's a pre-ferment instead of bread anymore. But it's great because you can be late to work, and then it's not a big deal because it's not like the bread is.
Basically has a flat on the way.
Yeah, it's not like the bread. Yeah, I mean, it used to be when the bread's ready to go, like you better be ready to put the bread in the oven. Now, if it's in the walk-in, like you got a couple hours, or so it's not. It's a good idea for anybody.
So I might call on you again. This is our revolving oven, and we have, I don't know if you guys know, but for a while we couldn't get open because it was supposed to take 8 days to move it, and it ended up taking 21 days. And, yeah, there's a complete 8 stained shelves that go around. There's a spiral wheel that if you look up inside, it weighs about 800 to 1,000 pounds. It turns the whole carriage. It's a 56 pan oven. It holds about 450 loaves of bread at one time. You did? Well, when you have to take it apart piece by piece. Right. And literally, it filled the whole side of our building and this room when we went to put it back together. And being a model that was not, a new model, and it was also a hybrid. It was in between 2 different years and models. So the guys, the only people I could find was in Pennsylvania, and they said, yeah, we can do it in 7 days. I said, 10 days is all right. Well, the 21st day, I'm on top of the oven helping them assemble it, It's like, this can't go any longer, but it was quite an adventure. Finally, it got up, we're running, baking good, but this oven, the clock, Ed, is synchronized to each shelf. Okay. So you have a number of shelves, so you can just look at it without opening the doors to see which shelf you're looking at. But it's pretty. They put in what's called a dicuminous earth, and it's like talcum powder, and it's 100 bags go in. So you have to vacuum it out to move the oven. Then you have to put it back in. Just 2 layers to put it in, and it's horrific. I think they would. You have to change that. Don't have to. Only when you move. Only when you move. But it's like the guys that were doing it by about the 50th bag. They would drive off, and I would try to find where they were at.
Down the river station.
Yeah. But this is bread John just pulled out of our artisan bread oven. It comes from Italy. And it's sourdough based. This is a sourdough, a lemon rosemary, which I don't know if we've had it or not, but we sell out of it pretty quickly. It's really, really tasty. A potato garlic and some sourdough baguettes. You know, but this oven produces a steam generation, and it gets on a really, really good crust. And to bake really good artisan breads, you really got to bring the ovens from Europe. You know, this comes from Italy. And it weighs about almost 10,500 pounds. Yes. You heat it up and it stays for like 10 hours. You know, you turn it off, it's still hot for the next day. It's still probably 200 degrees. So, and it's based on refractory. There's a complete line of refractory on each level, and then across each top is steam tubes. And so when you hit a steam button, it shoots a mist of steam out on the bread. You get the radiant heat from the bottom of the masonry material, and then you get the fine mist of the steam from the top that helps color and build the thin crust that everybody wants. You know. And this is an automatic loader. It loads. It will basically load the bread and then also unload it. Most of the ovens only have a loader, but we went for the difference to the automatic loader, which in the long run will allow us to produce a higher volume for less labor. You know. But John, you like to add anything? Maybe demonstrate the steam on this oven, John.
Oh yeah, turn it on. You can hear it. I mean, it's been off for a little while, but it's still 420 degrees probably at least.
But it just pulled this bread out. It looks beautiful, John.
Thanks. Yeah, that stuff isn't cold proof because we baked it today just to have a little bit more. It's coming out of the second deck. I mean, you might be able to see it coming out of the fourth deck by hitting on that one.
Thing loads bread.
Oh, I'll show you. I'll drop something on there so you can see it real quick. Hold these things real quick. You're gonna have to step back because this actually drops, but I mean this. Oh, you're coming through, Juice? Yeah, it's I mean it moves every level, and then
I didn't realize
yeah, so I mean, yeah, you basically can drop some. I mean, we put 12 to 15 loaves of bread unless it's baguettes, then it's less, and just drop it in and come out, you know, drop 15 in and then right out. So, and it's usually, most of these breads are like anywhere between 35 and 45 minutes, unless it's a baguette. And in that case, usually if it takes you like maybe 3 minutes to load one day, to get it loaded / steamed, then take you close to 36, 40 minutes. So if I load this tier, then this tier, this tier, this tier, usually, as soon as I get done loading the top deck, I'm ready to pull bread out of the bottom. And then by the time everything's out, I can do another load. So you can do, 160 loads of bread at a time for one bake. Unless it's baguettes, just because they take up space, and this can end up, bread can move around a little bit if you're not careful. And so,
Joe never had a question about cutting the bread, John.
Yeah.
You don't know if the razor or the texture.
Yeah, it's just I mean, you can get the blades from it's just a double-sided straight razor, I mean, I've seen people put them on coffee stirrers, You just hold it on there, and the reason why you want it bent is if you look at some of the breads, you can see that some of them will have an ear to it where you can actually pick it up, and it allows you to, instead of just cutting into the bread, you can actually lift up on the bread. not a really good example right here, but the sharper the blade, the more you can get kind of under the skin, and you don't want to cut too deep because then the bread will, the ears will fall in on themselves. If you don't cut deep enough, you're just going to scratch the surface. And scoring the bread really allows the bread to open up how you want it to. If you were to just put like an X on top of it, it would blow up like a volcano. So you want to kind of open it up. Round loaves, you kind of want to score to the sides so they spread before they lift off. And longer loaves, you want to cut, with the loaf, because it's only going to open in one direction. You don't want the baguette to pan out. So,
John, they use it like over there is a hooch, and that's what's used to roll the bread before it goes into the oven. John, do it. It's just show them. Like how
they just sit on there. They just sit on there, and
they just go in, and they're placed in this covering, hold the moisture in.
they're bread on there.
Somebody missed one.
Come on in, John.
Let's put that in the oven real quick.
And the baguettes are just stacked in a row and then protected and formed that way,
This is fine here. We'll score a loaf of bread.
It's meant to be.
Yeah.
It's time to get some sleep, maybe. I think. I don't know.
But it still amazes me how resilient the dough is,
Well, this may not make it. We'll
a little
see
bit.
if it's
That's a sourdough, John.
Yeah, it's a sourdough. It's
It just.
I mean, this oven's 465 degrees right now, so we don't need to turn it on. It'll bake. It'll be done in probably 25 minutes. When you load it, if you just have one loaf of bread in there, like I said, this sourdough. Sourdough's 570 grams. It'll bake in like 25 minutes. When you load it up with bread, then all this dough is like an ice cubes. So it
Takes the heat.
Yeah, more things in the oven take a little bit longer. So one loaf of bread it'll cook quickly.
On our yeast breads, it just all basically goes through the conventional slicing. If you sample, got to show you up there, that's our Grains Galore, which is our #1 seller. And it's due to the combination of 9-grain mix and fresh milk flour and seeds, so you get almost a complete protein, or as complete a protein as you can get with bread by combining the 9 different grains and the 3 seeds and fresh milk base. But you can see we can make one. I think yesterday we made 1,000 loaves of bread, and we're not fully automated. Where the big mass producers can do 20,000 loaves, but for us, 1,000 loaves, I work these kids pretty hard. They're yelling at me, The kids that come in to slice are usually high school. It's usually, a lot of times it's their first job, and it's a good experience for them. So, anybody got any questions or anything they'd like to see, or everybody get sampling. We have a whole sample bar downstairs. I don't know about artisan breads. Did you try some artisan breads? Let's go down and make sure we got plenty. I'll grab some of
I
it.
have one little question. You're making more bread than you sell right here.
Mm-hmm.
Are you selling to restaurants?
Well, we sell to 10 health food stores on our whole grain breads.
I've seen you at the markets.
And then we do 13 farmers markets per week, And this line of bread will eventually be able for us to sell at the restaurants. And we'll probably go through a process if things go right. In a year from now, we'll be able to fast freeze it and store it, and then have the restaurants heat it as they serve it. That's our hope anyway.